Hands up. Step away from that stolen vehicle.
Stolen? Officer, this is my car.
What are you talking about?
We got a report of a car matching this description being used in a felony. You matched
I just
the
came
driver.
from my office. My registration.
Don't reach. I'm telling you to keep your hands where I can see them.
I'm trying to comply, but you need to verify.
Officer Tyler Grant had been with the Philadelphia Police Department for 13 years. In those 13 years, he'd accumulated 26 formal complaints. 22 of them involved black drivers he'd pulled over in affluent neighborhoods without legitimate traffic violations. A black businessman in a Mercedes was stopped for suspicious driving pattern. A black woman in a BMW was detained for failure to signal when surveillance footage showed she had. A black college professor was searched for drugs during a routine outrage stop with no traffic violation. A black real estate developer was handcuffed during a stop for matching a description that was never verified. A black attorney was detained for driving too slowly in a 25 Mepere residential zone. Every complaint ended the same way. Use of force review that cleared him, bias training he attended but dismissed, written warnings that accumulated but meant nothing. One Tuesday afternoon in Philadelphia, his 13-year pattern of pretextual stops targeting black drivers in expensive cars finally confronted someone who prosecuted federal crimes for a living, knew constitutional law better than most judges, and had the full authority of the U.S. Department of Justice behind him. That confrontation would end Grant's career, cost the city $6.2 million, and expose a department that had ignored 26 complaints over 13 years. Marcus Hayes, a 43-year-old assistant United States attorney, was driving his Audi through Rittenhouse Square after a court hearing when he saw flashing lights behind him. His federal credentials were in his suit pocket, his bar card in his wallet, his case files in his briefcase. He just successfully argued for a sentence enhancement in a public corruption case. He was heading back to the U.S. Attorney's Office to prep for another trial scheduled for next week. No traffic violation, no erratic driving, no legitimate reason for the stop, just a federal prosecutor driving through an upscale neighborhood. But Officer Grant saw him through a lens so warped by racial assumptions that he couldn't process a black man in an expensive car as anything other than suspicious. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button. These stories expose the truth. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Rittenhouse Square, one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods with luxury apartments, upscale restaurants, and tree-lined streets. The area attracted wealthy professionals, including lawyers, doctors, and executives who worked in Center City. Real estate prices regularly exceeded $1 million for condominiums. The streets were clean, well-maintained, and heavily patrolled. It was 3:45 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, temperature 65 there, partly cloudy. Traffic was moderate as the workday wound down. Pedestrians walked dogs, professionals grabbed coffee, the neighborhood hummed with affluent routine. Marcus Hayes had been an assistant U.S. attorney for 11 years in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. He'd graduated from Howard University's summa cum laude, then Yale Law School, where he'd been on the Law Review and published 2 articles on criminal procedure. He'd clerked for a Third Circuit judge, worked at a major law firm for 3 years, then joined the U.S. Attorney's Office, where he prosecuted federal crimes, public corruption, civil rights violations, organized crime, financial fraud. He'd argued before the Third Circuit Court of Appeals multiple times, won major convictions against corrupt politicians and violent criminals, supervised junior prosecutors. He'd received the Attorney General's Award for Distinguished Service. He specialized in prosecuting law enforcement officers who violated civil rights under color of law. Just 2 months earlier, he'd secured a conviction against a police officer who'd falsified arrest reports. The irony of what was about to happen would not be lost on him. That afternoon, Marcus had just left federal court after a sentencing hearing in a corruption case. He'd convinced the judge to impose a substantial sentence on a city official who'd embezzled public funds. He was driving back to his office, obeying all traffic laws, when he noticed a patrol car following him for several blocks. He checked his speed, 28 in a 30 mph in Hidge zone. He'd signaled every turn. He'd stopped completely at every stop sign. Then the lights came on. Do you think officers should be required to state the reason for traffic stops immediately? Drop your answer below. Officer Grant had those 26 complaints over 13 years. 22 involved black drivers in wealthy neighborhoods, a pattern so undeniable it should have ended his career years ago. But Philadelphia PD treated each complaint in isolation, never connecting the dots that screamed racial profiling. Grant's supervisors had recommended disciplinary action 3 times, but the police union had successfully blocked any serious consequences. His personnel file was thick with documented bias, yet he remained on patrol with full arrest authority. That afternoon, Grant was patrolling Rittenhouse Square when he saw a black man driving an Audi with tinted windows. No traffic violation occurred, but Grant pulled him over anyway, adding a notation in his log about suspicious vehicle behavior that he'd fabricate the details of later. Marcus pulled to the curb carefully, put his car in park, turned off the engine, and kept his hands visible on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. He'd prosecuted enough cases involving traffic stops gone wrong to know exactly how these situations could escalate. He'd seen the dashboard camera footage, read the autopsy reports, heard the families testify. He kept his hands where they could be seen. Grant approached the driver's side window aggressively, his hand already resting on his service weapon in a manner clearly designed to intimidate. "License and registration, now." Marcus spoke calmly and clearly. "Good afternoon, officer. Can you tell me why you pulled me over?" I said license and registration. Don't make me ask again. Marcus's legal training kicked in immediately. "Officer, I have a right to know the reason for the stop. What traffic violation did I commit? I was traveling below the speed limit. I signaled all my turns. I stopped completely at every intersection. What is the legal basis for this traffic stop?" Grant's hand moved toward his weapon more deliberately. "Step out of the vehicle. You're being detained." "Detained for what specific violation? I was driving the speed limit. I signaled all my turns. I stopped at every light. What's the legal basis for this stop? Under Terry v. Ohio, you need reasonable suspicion of criminal activity to detain me. Step out now or you're under arrest." Marcus remained calm but firm, knowing every word mattered. "Officer, I'm Marcus Hayes. I'm an assistant United States attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. My credentials are in my suit jacket pocket. I'm going to slowly reach for them with my right hand. My left hand will remain visible. I'm not armed. I'm a federal prosecutor." Grant sneered. "Sure you are. Everyone's a lawyer when they get pulled over. Step out of the vehicle. Final warning." "I'm serious. I prosecute federal crimes for the Department of Justice. I specialize in civil rights violations, including unlawful detention by law enforcement. What you're doing right now is an unlawful detention. You have no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, no articulable traffic violation. This stop violates the Fourth Amendment. Last warning, out of the car." Marcus pulled out his phone with one hand while keeping the other visible on the steering wheel. "I'm recording this interaction for my safety and for documentation purposes. Officer Grant, badge number 4782, pulled me over at 3:47 p.m. on Walnut Street without stating a traffic violation. I've identified myself as a federal prosecutor. This is an unlawful stop under the Fourth Amendment. Should officers face federal charges for unlawful stops? Let me know what you think." Grant opened the car door forcefully. "You're under arrest for obstruction and resisting arrest." "Resisting what arrest? I'm sitting in my car with my hands visible. I haven't moved. I haven't resisted anything. There's no lawful basis for arrest." Grant grabbed Marcus's arm roughly and pulled him out of the vehicle. Marcus didn't resist physically, but spoke clearly and calmly for his recording and for the pedestrians who'd stopped to watch. "I am not resisting. I am complying fully with all commands. I am Marcus Hayes, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. I am being unlawfully arrested by Officer Tyler Grant. I have committed no crime, no traffic violation, no obstruction. This is a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights and potentially a violation of 18 U.S.C., paragraph 242, deprivation of rights under a color of law." Pedestrians on the sidewalk were recording now on their phones. "That's wrong," one shouted. "He didn't do anything," another yelled. "I saw the whole thing. He was just driving," a third witness called out. Grant handcuffed Marcus, the metal tight on his wrists, cinched deliberately tighter than necessary. He walked him toward the patrol car while Marcus continued documenting every detail. "I prosecute federal crimes for the Department of Justice. I specialize in cases involving law enforcement misconduct. I'm being arrested for driving while black in Rittenhouse Square. I have multiple witnesses and video evidence. The time is now 3:52 p.m. I am being placed in the back of patrol car number 447. Grant placed him in the back of the patrol car roughly, pushing his head down harder than necessary. Through the window, Marcus could see his Audi with the door still open, his briefcase visible on the passenger seat containing sensitive federal case files about ongoing investigations. He was already thinking about the multiple legal violations: unlawful stop without reasonable suspicion, false arrest without probable cause, deprivation of rights under color of law, potential obstruction of justice for detaining a federal prosecutor, improper use of force with the handcuffs, possible tampering with federal evidence if anyone accessed his case files. The drive to the station took 18 minutes through Center City traffic. Marcus spent every minute of it mentally cataloging evidence, identifying witnesses, and preparing the case he knew would follow. They arrived at the Central Division headquarters on Race Street. Grant walked him inside, still handcuffed, past a desk sergeant who looked up with immediate concern at seeing a well-dressed black man in handcuffs. "Grant, what's the situation?" "Traffic stop, obstruction, and resisting arrest." The sergeant frowned, clearly skeptical. "What was the initial violation?" "Suspicious vehicle in Rittenhouse Square." "Suspicious how? What specific traffic law did he violate?" Grant hesitated, realizing he hadn't thought this through. He was driving erratically. Marcus spoke up, his prosecutor voice cutting through the room with authority. "Sergeant, I'm Assistant United States Attorney Marcus Hayes, Eastern District of Pennsylvania. I was driving from federal court back to my office when Officer Grant pulled me over without stating a traffic violation or any legal basis for the stop. I asked for the reason for the stop, which is my constitutional right under the Fourth Amendment. He detained me, then arrested me for obstruction when I identified myself as a federal prosecutor and cited relevant case law. I have witnesses, video evidence from my phone and from pedestrians, and no traffic violation occurred. This is an unlawful arrest of a federal official. You need to contact the U.S. Attorney's Office immediately at 215-861-8200. Ask for First Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Rodriguez. This is now a federal matter." The sergeant's face went pale, his hand already reaching for the phone. "You're a federal prosecutor?" 11 years. I prosecute civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Parv 242, including unlawful arrests by law enforcement officers. I've convicted 3 police officers in the past 2 years for exactly this type of conduct. I'm now the victim in exactly the type of case I prosecute. I suggest you make that call immediately before this situation gets exponentially worse for everyone involved." The sergeant grabbed the phone and called the U.S. Attorney's Office, his voice shaking slightly as he explained the situation. Within minutes, the call was escalated to the U.S. Attorney himself, who immediately contacted the FBI and the Philadelphia Police Commissioner. Within 15 minutes, the First Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Rodriguez arrived at the station with 2 FBI special agents from the Civil Rights Division. Within 20 minutes, the police commissioner was on site, having been personally called by the U.S. Attorney. Within 30 minutes, the situation had escalated to involve the mayor's office and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division in Washington. The commissioner approached Marcus, who was still handcuffed in an interview room, and removed them personally with shaking hands. "Mr. Hayes, this arrest was completely unjustified and potentially criminal. You're being released immediately with the deepest apologies of the Philadelphia Police Department. We are launching an immediate investigation into Officer Grant and into why his pattern of complaints was not addressed." He turned to Grant, who'd been standing in the hallway looking increasingly panicked. "Badge and weapon. You're suspended without pay pending termination and possible federal charges. Do not leave the city. The FBI will want to speak with you." Grant protested weakly. "Commissioner, he was driving suspiciously in an expensive car." "You pulled over a federal prosecutor without a traffic violation. You arrested him for exercising his constitutional rights. You've generated 26 complaints in 13 years, 22 involving black drivers, and nobody stopped you because of union protection and supervisory negligence. Your career is over. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is now involved. The FBI is involved. Badge, weapon, now." By that evening, the story had exploded nationally and internationally. The U.S. Attorney's Office issued a scathing public statement. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division announced a pattern and practice investigation into the entire Philadelphia Police Department. The FBI opened a federal criminal investigation into Grant. National media covered it extensively, with legal experts weighing in on the constitutional violations. Video from witnesses went viral on social media, showing a federal prosecutor being arrested during a traffic stop, generating millions of views and widespread outrage. Civil rights organizations demanded systemic reform. Marcus filed a comprehensive federal lawsuit 8 months later against Officer Tyler Grant individually, his supervisors who'd ignored 26 complaints, the Philadelphia Police Department, the City of Philadelphia, and the police union for blocking disciplinary action. The allegations were extensive and damning: unlawful traffic stop without probable cause or reasonable suspicion, false arrest in violation of the Fourth Amendment, false imprisonment, deprivation of rights under color of law in violation of 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 2 out of 42, interference with federal duties, obstruction of justice, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, racial profiling and discrimination in violation of the 14th Amendment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, deliberate indifference to Grant's pattern of constitutional violations, failure to train and supervise, municipal liability for maintaining policies that enabled racial profiling. The complaint included Grant's complete disciplinary record: 26 complaints over 13 years, 22 involving black drivers in affluent areas, multiple supervisor recommendations for termination that were blocked, and a clear pattern of racial profiling that the department had documented but ignored. Philadelphia's city attorneys initially attempted to defend the case but quickly realized they had no viable defense. Dashboard camera footage from Grant's patrol car showed no traffic violation. Body camera footage showed Marcus complying with all commands while Grant escalated unnecessarily. Witnesses confirmed Marcus was driving legally and was arrested for asking questions. Video evidence from multiple sources existed. Grant had zero legal basis for the stop and zero probable cause for the arrest. The pattern of complaints showed deliberate indifference rising to the level of municipal liability. The involvement of a federal prosecutor added multiple aggravating factors. The city's own internal affairs reports documented that Grant should have been terminated years earlier. The city settled 21 months later, $6.2 million paid to Marcus Hayes, one of the largest civil rights settlements in Philadelphia history involving a traffic stop and one of the largest ever involving a federal prosecutor. Officer Tyler Grant was terminated 9 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was unambiguous and scathing. Officer Grant conducted an unlawful traffic stop of a federal prosecutor without probable cause, reasonable suspicion, or any articulable traffic violation. He arrested a sitting assistant U.S. attorney for exercising constitutional rights and identifying himself as a federal official. He ignored clearly stated legal objections and constitutional citations. His pattern of similar conduct over 13 years, documented through 26 complaints with 22 involving black drivers, demonstrates a consistent pattern of racial profiling and an inability to serve the public without racial bias. Employment terminated immediately for cause. All benefits forfeited. Grant faced federal criminal charges for deprivation of rights under color of law, a felony under 18 U.S.C., paragraph 242. After reviewing the evidence, federal prosecutors offered a plea deal to avoid trial. He pleaded guilty and received 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a permanent ban from law enforcement. His name entered the National Decertification Index, ensuring he could never work as a police officer again anywhere in the United States. Marcus testified before the Philadelphia City Council in a packed chamber and later before a congressional subcommittee examining racial profiling and traffic stops. "I'm a federal prosecutor. I've spent 11 years prosecuting criminals, including law enforcement officers who violate civil rights under color of law. I know the law inside and out. I know constitutional rights. I know criminal procedure. And I was unlawfully arrested for driving while black in an expensive car in a wealthy neighborhood." He paused, letting that sink in. 26 complaints in 13 years. 22 involving black drivers in wealthy neighborhoods. Multiple supervisors recommended termination. The pattern was documented, analyzed, and ignored. That's not law enforcement. That's racial profiling with a badge and union protection. Philadelphia PD ignored it, enabled it, and protected it until Officer Grant arrested someone who happened to be a federal prosecutor with the knowledge, authority, and resources to hold him accountable under federal civil rights law. He continued, his voice carrying the weight of professional expertise and personal trauma. $6.2 million is what it costs taxpayers when you ignore patterns of constitutional violations for 13 years. But money doesn't undo being handcuffed on a public street while pedestrians record it on their phones. It doesn't erase the humiliation of being arrested while federal case files about ongoing investigations sit in your car for anyone to access. It doesn't restore the dignity lost when an officer sneers at your credentials and calls you a liar. And it doesn't prevent the next officer with 26 complaints from doing it to someone else who doesn't have federal prosecutorial authority to fight back. Philadelphia PD implemented sweeping, court-monitored reforms as part of the settlement, mandatory articulation of specific traffic violations before conducting any stop, automatic investigation triggered by 3 similar complaints within 3 years, body camera and dashboard camera review for all traffic stops with mandatory supervisor sign-off, Department of Justice oversight and monitoring, ban on pretextual stops without clear and articulable violations, early warning system for officers with patterns of complaints, mandatory reporting of all stops with demographic data, independent civilian review board with subpoena power, and elimination of union contract provisions that blocked disciplinary action for civil rights violations. Why do departments wait for 26 complaints instead of acting after 3? Comment your thoughts. This wasn't about one Tuesday afternoon in Rittenhouse Square. This was about tolerating Tyler Grant for 13 years, despite 26 complaints showing systematic racial bias that any reasonable supervisor could see. This was about a system that documented problems, analyzed patterns, and then protected the officer anyway through union contracts and supervisory indifference. Marcus Hayes paid the price. A federal prosecutor with impeccable credentials arrested for driving while black. Grant's career is over. He's in federal prison. His conviction is permanent. The city paid $6.2 million of taxpayer money, but all of that came after 13 years of ignored warnings, blocked disciplinary actions, and a complaint system that documented everything but changed nothing. Comment if 3 similar complaints should trigger automatic termination regardless of union contracts. And if you believe these stories matter, if you think the system needs fundamental reform, then hit that subscribe button. We're exposing departments that ignore documented patterns of constitutional violations. We're demanding accountability not just for individual officers, but for the systems that protect them. This isn't about one officer or one prosecutor. It's about systems that protect bad cops over protecting the public, even when that public includes federal law enforcement officials who prosecute the very crimes being committed against them.